Virginians. What happens in the dark in our courts must come to light. It is incumbent on all of us to recognize when due process rights is violated, as well as scrutinize the decisions and the verdict that happens in our courts. This allows for fair trials and allows for authentic and credible information to be relayed so people can know exactly what happened in our courts. Virginia no longer needs courts of no record. This is normally done in our general district courts as well as our J&R courts. In circuit courts all across Virginia, some courts have allowed testimony that has not been recorded by a court reporter or a transcript that has been filed to give out statements and words made by parties that may not be exactly what a party has said. It is my understanding that a lot of courthouses have a rule where you must request permission from the court to record the proceedings. And it's at the discretion of the judge. Criminal justice reform is not just for the police, it's for us too, as well as agents of the police, as well as clerks of the law. It is now more important than ever, given the liberal nature of our judges and those who have been appointed and not elected to office, to have more strict scrutiny done upon them. If one court can have televised proceedings, so shall all courts in Virginia do the same. There's a way to protect witnesses or criminal informants by fading out their face, but their testimony must be recorded and preserved no matter which court that they testify to. There's a such thing as those who will use the courts for their own personal gain and will lie. And had it been recorded in lower courts, that lie could have been exposed in the higher courts. This is not about justice just for Black America or white America. This is about justice and fairness for all. The fact is, when a circuit court judge will allow any party to testify to statements or facts that was made in a lower court that wasn't preserved on the record, there's no way to determine that is the exact statement or facts that was presented to a court, and to allow it to be accepted as admissible evidence. The only way we can have change that people can trust and the information or statements is authentic is to make sure that all court hearings in Virginia are recorded by video and audio, and to make sure those records are preserved so that people can use them later if there's an appeal to a higher court, whether it's circuit court, court of appeals, or the Supreme Court. I don't believe people can remember that far back what was said exactly word for word of a case that may have been heard months ago, and to use that information and say that there's no need to certify or authenticate or provide a transcript of proceedings. Instead goes by your word to say this was said in a lower court. Virginia has always had courts of no record. So why all of a sudden a record will exist that has no bearing until it is authenticated by those that say that's exactly what happened. It's abuse of discretion by courts to allow it. The only way to address it and to correct it is to make sure that any proceeding in our courts is videotaped and the audio is recorded. So if there is a dispute in the legal proceedings about what was said or done in a lower court, there's adequate evidence or information preserved by these courts to make sure that's exactly what happened. Far too often, those without lawyers will request for the proceedings to be recorded by audio or by video means, and that decision is based off a judge that decides on whether they will allow it or not. This allows for justice to be done in the dark and not in the light, especially if you are going to use what happened in the lower court to affect the outcome in the higher court. In circuit courts, it is required that a court reporter be there present for all legal proceedings. But a court reporter is not required to be in the lower court for those proceedings. This allows for people to change their testimony under oath without having the strictest of scrutiny given to their testimony to make sure that's exactly what was said in the lower court under oath. Under oath means that whatever you said can be used against you. But the fact is, Virginia has always had the confusion that lower courts like General District Court and J&R Court, under certain circumstances and at the discretion of the judge, may or may not be recorded. This allows for the abuse of record keeping, the abuse of due process to make sure that all parties are held to the same standard of truth and fact, and it allows for the judge to know exactly what has happened compared to go off of somebody's word. Going off of people's word, whether it's the police or the average citizen, it may be true, but the fact of the matter is, far too often, there's no record to say that happened. And then it's about the credibility of the witnesses compared to the credibility of evidence that could have been preserved had it been allowed for recordings to be done in that court. This is criminal justice reform, but also at the same time period, it must have action, not shallow words or campaign pitch promises that lead to nowhere. This allows for the distrust in the community as well as those who decide the most important decisions to affect the lives of those that go before them. It must be in all of us to say that it's time for change. I'm not the typical Republican, and I didn't care to be the typical Republican. I always cared about truth and justice, and also making sure law and order is done. This what measures us all from those who will be honorable and give out truthfully what they know and what they say, compared to those who will manipulate the courts and use it for their own personal gain. That's why it's so important that we no longer appoint judges, but we elect judges. But we also, at the same time frame, make sure justice has equality. Equality comes with making sure that we do not tip the scales of justice to allow for those to lie or for those to abuse their discretion at any time frame that they want to, because there's no way to prove that they did it before. This allows for liars on liars to know exactly what to say to a judge to get them to decide their way, while leaving those who are victimized by the system to continue its abuse based off a lie. We cannot continue to allow for crying wolves in courts. We must make sure we stop it as soon as possible, not with further delay that allows for wrongfully imprisoned people or for those to get away with crimes or with verdicts that wasn't worthy of the outcome. If O.J. Simpson's trial can be televised as well as Derek Chauvin's trial can be televised, so can all courts here in America be televised. If police can wear body-worn cameras, so can judges. But I would not want to put that burden where there's an easier and more effective way. To videotape and have audio of exactly these proceedings allow for lawyers as well as those who represent themselves to have a record of exactly what happened at court and to use it for impeachment purposes, which of course is allowed under Brady, as well as Giglio evidence and more. This allows for those to catch people in a lie and make sure that people are held accountable, whether through perjury or making sure that the outcome is done in a manner in which the public can trust. This has to happen because at this time period, the abuse of discretion has been going on for far too long. And I hope that more people will jump on board, as well as lawmakers, as well as the courts, to say enough is enough. We either have a court of no record, or that court, if it allows for any record in it, to be preserved. This is important for historical factors as well as justice. The courts cannot do it alone. It must come through us acting and demanding of our lawmakers and more that this needs to be done, because it may be you on trial for your life, and you may know that something was said in the lower court that can affect the outcome of the trial in the higher court. Our job is not to lock up people wrongfully or to fine or punish people needlessly. But we do want to make sure people are held accountable, to include the witnesses that come before the court, as well as the judges that make decisions that may be contrary of it from the start. When you put on that black robe, as well as a police officer puts on his uniform, just like you go to court and raise your hand to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God. This is no different than doing so and making sure that your truth is the truth, not lies and fiction of hearsay. This has to happen. Too many courts, whether it's Brunswick County, whether it's Martinsville, Danville, Lynchburg, or more rural areas, where they pick and choose what is recorded and what is not. This is the same as selecting winners and losers, and it's also the same as also putting socialism and communism in our court. If you allow it for one, you must allow it for all. And far too often, this does not happen. Most people will not be able to afford a court reporter. They won't be able to afford even the means to record. But we should not burden them any further, because justice is what we want and search for. If we can pay for public defenders, we can pay for video and audio recordings that will lead to the truth and lead to proper investigations based off of it from all parties and all sides. The same way I believe in open file discovery. I believe in this for all people, because I've seen all races and backgrounds be affected with negative outcomes had it been known earlier that a witness had lied. This is important, people. No doubt about it, and leaders must speak up on this. And a lot of people don't even know about it until it happens to them. And it doesn't mean you're at fault for not knowing, but for you to know now and to act silent, that's a part of the problem. And far too often it happens on other matters, just like our schools, when we find out that you no longer have to, the schools no longer have to report that your child has been sexually assaulted to the parents. All this darkness, and then once light hits, leads anybody to believe that we no longer look after the citizens that we say that we are going to protect and serve, but we realistically only look after ourselves, and that's the elites. Some people say justice is only for those who can afford their version of it. But what happens in our courts and when people provide testimony and those records is preserved, that's fundamental fairness to make sure that the truth is the truth, not a lie that we promote as lies. And our judges' decisions on motions and on the reasons or the explanations for their decisions can be fairly scrutinized word by word of exactly what happened, not from a court reporter that decides on making sure certain words are omitted from the transcript. And how many can really say that is exactly what all has happened, and how many court reporters can say that they may have made a mistake? It's easy to do, and we all know that mistakes do happen, and then some things are intentional and based off of bad faith. But I have faith still in our justice system, but we must improve it, and we must recognize these flaws. It's either a court of no record, or it's going to be a court of record that we can trust and believe that what happened is actually what happened in that court. So I call on all lawmakers in Virginia, and even to our Virginia stupid governor and the rest. This is common sense. Common sense. And if you didn't know this was going on, where people was allowed to say what somebody said in a lower court and there's no record of it, but it's going off of human memory, there's something wrong here. Very wrong. I don't care whether it's the police or the citizen. There must be common sense here to say it's hard to remember exactly what somebody said in a lower court where it wasn't no record and the judge denied the recording of those proceedings. And the outcome wasn't favorable to one side or the other, but it still must be a record of why and what exactly happened. That's why when we watch proceedings on TV, all localities should put their lower and their circuit court, as well as the Court of Appeals and Supreme Court, on their local television. Cases like monument removal, eminent domain, murder trials, and more. It should be viewed by the public, especially when access to the courts has been limited by COVID restrictions and Governor Northam's mandates and unconstitutional behavior. So people can adequately prepare a defense or make sure that they have their paperwork straight and understand how our justice system continues to work. Ignorance of the law is no excuse, but the law cannot promote more ignorance. My name is Merle Rutledge, And I'm still running for governor of Virginia. God bless you, and God bless America. Amen.